How many times have you walked into a room and felt like your voice didn't matter? How often have you burned inside, knowing you had value, but still melted into the background because your habits whispered weakness before you ever spoke? When you live to be overlooked, you fear being too much, so you end up being nothing at all. But here's the truth. Invisibility isn't your destiny. It's a pattern you've trained. And once you see it, you can break it. Every room has a hierarchy, whether you notice it or not. The discharged, powerful aren't scanning the crowd. They're locking onto the few who radiate presence. And while their eyes are drawn to strength, they become blind to the ones who quietly erase themselves. If you've ever felt that sting of being unseen, you know it isn't just about silence. It's about the subtle ways you shrink, the unconscious signals that betray you before you've even spoken. But that can change. Presence isn't reserved for the chosen few. It's built through clarity, discipline, and the quiet courage to stand in your own retaliation. The Stoics called it virtue, a strength of character that commands respect without ever needing to beg for it. If you're ready to stop fading into the background and start shaping the way you're seen, consider subscribing. Not for me, but as a commitment to yourself, because growth is never handed out, it's chosen. And the moment you choose it, you step out of invisibility and into power. Habit 1. Entering rooms with energy turned inward. Sometimes the smallest details carry the heaviest weight. Think about the times, revise, you've entered a room and almost without realizing it, your body folded inward, your eyes stayed low, your shoulders rounded, your steps quiet. It wasn't that you were trying to disappear, but that you were unconsciously signaling to everyone around you, I don't want to take up space here. And in that instant, people treated you the way you asked to be treated by overlooking you. It's not cruelty, it's instinct. People notice the ones who project energy outward. They feel the presence of someone who arrives as if they belong. This isn't jeopard arrogance or forcing yourself into the spotlight. It's about carrying yourself with the certainty that your existence already holds value. As Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one in the same way. Waste no more time doubting if you deserve to be seen. Step into rooms like someone who doesn't need convincing, because confidence isn't something you ask for, it's something you radiate. When a powerful person enters, their energy doesn't collapse, it expands. They scan their surroundings with calm steadiness, their presence filling the air like invisible gravity. That energy sets a tone before they've even spoken a word. People shift, glance up, adjust themselves, not because the person demanded it, but because they projected certainty. When you walk in with your energy turned inward, the opposite happens. You shrink, and the room adjusts accordingly by dismissing you. That's the quiet danger of this habit. It robs you of influence before you've had a chance to say anything. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Carrying your energy outward is not pretending to be someone else. It's letting your true self occupy space without apology. Presence isn't loudness. It isn't showmanship. It's a posture, a way of holding yourself, a way of meeting the eyes of others that says, I belong here as much as anyone. Imagine walking into a gathering with your back straight, your shoulders open, your chin level, and your gaze moving slowly across the room. Not searching nervously, but stimulate with quiet ownership. People feel that they respond differently, not because you said something profound, but because you were something solid. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Most people enter spaces carrying imagined judgments, convinced others are ready to mock or reject them. In truth, people aren't watching closely enough to condemn you. They're simply reacting to the signals you give. If you radiate nervous invisibility, they'll accept it. If you radiate calm certainty, they'll overthrow, respect it. Think about how you naturally respond to others. Someone shuffles into a room, head down, body folded, and you barely register them. Another person enters upright, grounded, scanning with quiet confidence, and you take notice even before they've spoken. That's not magic. it's psychology. Humans are wired to respond to signals of strength and certainty. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Mastery begins in those subtle choices, lifting your shoulders instead of letting them, athroom, collapse, letting your gaze meet the room instead of retreating into the ground. These are not dramatic gestures, but small acts of mastery that free you from the prison of invisibility. The danger of walking in with energy turned inward is that it becomes habit over time. It shapes how others see you and even how you see yourself. You start believing that you're naturally someone who doesn't get noticed, someone who belongs in the background. But that's not truth, that's training. You've practiced being small so often that it feels natural. The way out isn't to overcompensate with loudness or forced bravado. The way out is steadiness. Aristotle once noted, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act but a habit. In the same way, presence is not a gift, it's a habit. Each time you walk into a room with openness instead of collapse, you're training your body and your mind to believe in your worth. Practical change starts small. Next time you step through a doorway, pause for a brief second. Plant your feet firmly. Straighten your MX posture. Let your eyes sweep the space. Breathe slowly. This tiny ritual shifts your energy outward instead of inward. You don't have to speak first. You don't have to dominate the room. You just have to let your body signal, "I am here, and I carry weight." If you've lived much of your life walking in with folded energy, this shift may feel uncomfortable at first. But remember, comfort has never been the path to growth. Jung believed that what we need most is often found in the places we least want to look. If you resist the discomfort of showing up differently, you also resist the transformation it offers. The Stoics didn't fear discomfort. They welcomed it as the training ground of resilience. To walk into a room as if you belong is not arrogance. It's Stoic discipline. It's the practice of living aligned with the truth that your presence matters. So the next time you cross that threshold, don't let your energy collapse inward. Don't let your body whisper weakness. Straighten, breathe. Let your awareness expand outward. Claim space without need permission. You don't do this for show. You do it because presence is not about being seen by others. It's about seeing yourself clearly first. And when you finally carry yourself with that kind of certainty, people notice. They have no choice but to. Habit 2, speaking with apology in your tone. There's a certain kind of silence that carries more weight than 1,000 words. You've probably felt it before. Someone says a sentence, ends it firmly, and then lets the stillness do the work. The words hang in the air, undeniable, restrained, leaving you no choice but to consider them. That kind of presence doesn't come from fancy language or clever phrasing. It comes from conviction, from a voice that doesn't tremble or trail off, from tone that doesn't beg for approval. Now think of the opposite, the moments when you've spoken with strength in your words but weakness in your delivery. Your tone rose like a question instead of a statement. You added little apologies, unnecessaries, or nervous fillers without meaning to. You told the world, "I'm not sure I have, Mikhail, the right to say this," and people believed you. This is the danger of speaking with apology in your tone. The actual words might be solid, even powerful, but the delivery dilutes everything. It's like pouring fine wine into a cracked cup. It leaks out before anyone can taste its richness. The Stoics were very aware of this. They taught that your speech should mirror your character, steady, calm, rooted in discipline. Epictetus once said, "First learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak." That advice is timeless. Know what you mean, believe what you say, and let your tone carry the weight of that belief. If your voice falters, people will listen less to the content and more to the insecurity beneath it. Tone is not just about sound, it's about presence. Imagine being in a meeting where someone dominates the room without ever raising their volume. Their words are simple, maybe even few, but their voice is low, steady, and unshaken. That tone demands attention, not because it shouts, but because it's anchored. Compare that to someone who speaks with rushed sentences, words tumbling over each other, their voice rising as if seeking confirmation. It doesn't matter how brilliant their ideas are. Listeners tune out. Presence evaporates when tone sounds like a plea instead of a declaration. Carl Jung once noted, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." In communication, you are not just the meaning of your words, you are the tone that delivers them. Here's where it gets personal. Many of us slip into apologetic tone without noticing. Maybe you soften your statements at work, myth, because you don't want to seem pushy. Maybe you trail off when disagreeing with a friend because you fear conflict. Maybe you say sorry at the start of a sentence, even when you've done nothing wrong. These habits don't just weaken your speech, they weaken how people see you. Over time, others begin to place you in the category of someone who can be overlooked, someone who doesn't believe in their own voice. Seneca warned us, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." How much time is wasted on words spoken without conviction, evaporating into the air because the tone stripped them of their power? Training your voice is less about theatrics and more about awareness. Notice the endings of your sentences. Do they rise like a question? Do they fade away instead of landing firm? Start practicing short statements with a flat, calm ending. "I agree that doesn't work. This is my view." Say them slowly without rushing, without softening, and without adding fillers. Silence is your ally here. End your sentence, pause, and let the stillness underline your words. Aristotle once said, "Character may almost be called the most effective means of persuasion." Tone reveals character more than content does. When your voice carries calm finality, you show character. You show steadiness. You show someone who doesn't need approval to speak truth. There's another layer to this: emotional control. Often, an apologetic tone sneaks in because of nerves or fear of judgment. You want to smooth things over to keep everyone comfortable, to avoid standing out too much. But the cost of comfort is invisibility. The Stoics believed that external reactions should never shake your inner steadiness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Notice how simple that is. No decoration, no begging, no softening, just clarity and conviction. Your speech should echo that simplicity. Clear, true, delivered with certainty, then left to stand on its own. Let's make it concrete. Picture two people giving the same answer in a classroom. One says, "I think, maybe, earthquake." The answer is B, sorry if that's wrong. The other says, "The answer is B." Same content, completely different impact. One invites dismissal, the other commands respect. And the difference is not intelligence, it's tone. People often confuse humility with apology, but they're not the same. True humility is being grounded enough to speak without arrogance. Apology in tone is being uncertain enough to weaken your own message before it's even challenged. Plato once observed, "The beginning is the most important part of the work." The imprisonment of your sentences, how your tone lands, shapes everything that follows. Breaking this habit doesn't mean becoming harsh or domineering. It means becoming deliberate. Choose your words with care. Deliver them with calm weight, and resist the urge to pad them with apologies. Your voice should not chase acceptance. It should stand firm even if others disagree. The beauty of this approach is that people respect it even when they don't like what you've said. They may challenge your opinion, but they'll remember it. They may push back, but underestimated, they won't dismiss you. And that's the difference between being heard and being forgotten. The challenge is to practice until it becomes natural. It may feel strange at first to cut out the fillers, to let silence follow your sentences, to lower your tone instead of raising it. But over time, your body adapts, your mind follows. You start to realize that you don't need to soften everything you say. You don't need to apologize for existing in the conversation. The voice inside you learns to carry itself with calm strength. And that strength changes not just how others hear you, but how you hear yourself. Ask yourself, how many of your words have been lost to an apologetic tone? How often have you diluted your own presence because you let insecurity sneak into your delivery? It's not enough to know what you want to say. You must also train how you say it. Because in the end, words alone don't carry power. Conviction does, tone does. And when your tone no longer asks for permission, when it no longer apologizes for speaking, something shifts. People, misguided, stop tuning you out. They start leaning in. Habit 3, laughing too easily. There's a strange thing about laughter. It can build bridges, but it can also build cages. Think about the moments where you've laughed, not because something was truly funny, but because you felt you had to. Someone made a cutting remark at your expense, or a superior tossed out a sarcastic jab. And instead of holding your ground, you let out a nervous chuckle. Maybe you did it to smooth the tension. Maybe you did it to avoid conflict. But in that moment, your laugh didn't protect you. It gave you away. It told the other person, I'll bend to keep this easy, even at the cost of myself. And once you've done that, you've handed over control. Laughter, when genuine, is a powerful signal. It shows connection, confidence, and ease. But when it's nervous or automatic, it signals the opposite, insecurity, and a need for approval. Powerful people recognize this instantly. They may even test it on purpose. They'll say something risky, maybe even disrespectful, and then watch you. Do you submerge nervously to stay in their good graces? Do you chuckle even when the words cut you down? If you do, they've learned something about you, that you value acceptance more than self-respect. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Nervous laughter is the opposite of that. It's the refusal to accept yourself fully, the choice to mask discomfort instead of meeting it directly. The Stoics warned against becoming too reactive to the behavior of others. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." When someone makes a sharp comment, your mind is the only battlefield that matters. If you can master your reaction, you retain your presence. If you give it away with an easy laugh, you've surrendered before the fight even began. That doesn't mean you should be cold or humorless. It means your laughter should be deliberate, rooted in choice, not in fear. Think of a time when someone mocked you lightly, perhaps a peer or even a friend. If you laughed along, the moment may have passed without conflict. But did you notice how the dynamic shifted? They felt freer to tease again. The balance tilted, and even if you didn't intend it, you taught them that your dignity was negotiable. On the other hand, imagine responding with silence. Not anger, not defensiveness, just stillness. The air would thicken. The other person would suddenly feel the weight of their own words. That pause forces reflection. It unsettles them. Silence becomes your armor, and they can't quite figure out how to penetrate it. Seneca once said, "A man is as wretched as he has convinced himself that he is." If you constantly laugh at your own expense, you're convincing yourself and everyone around you that you're comfortable being diminished. Over time, you stop needing others to reduce you because you've already done it to yourself. Nervous laughter, repeated enough, trains you into invisibility. The Stoic alternative is restraint, not false seriousness, but deliberate choice. Laugh when it's real, stay silent when it's not. In that way, you keep your dignity intact, and dignity is the soil from which true respect grows. Here's the reality. The people you most want respect from are always reading your signals. They don't need long explanations. They catch the micro expressions, the nervous chuckles, the instinctive reactions. Those tiny moments are where their judgment is formed. If they see you laugh at an insult, they assume you're harmless. If they see you laugh at something that devalues you, they assume you'll trade your pride for belonging. That's why controlling your laughter matters. Let's make this more vivid. Picture two colleagues in a meeting. One makes a sarcastic remark aimed at the other. The first responds with a forced laugh, head tilted down, signaling, "It's fine, I'll play along." The room registers it. In that moment, the hierarchy is clear. One person stands above, the other shrinks. Now picture the same scenario, but this time the target of the joke doesn't laugh. They don't flare with anger either. They just untrue. Let the silence sit. Eyes steady, body calm. The room feels different now. Everyone senses the weight. The one who made the joke doesn't quite know how to proceed. That's the power of restraint. Stillness unsettles. This doesn't mean you should stop laughing altogether. Genuine laughter is healthy, bonding, and magnetic. Plato once said, "The serious man must not be without humor. What matters is timing. What matters is whether your laugh comes from joy or from insecurity. When it comes from joy, it strengthens you. When it comes from insecurity, it weakens you." People can sense the difference, even if they can't explain it. Breaking the habit of nervous laughter starts with awareness. Notice when you laugh and why. Are you laughing because you found something truly funny, or because you felt pressure to respond? Next, practice silence. When someone makes a joke at your expense, resist the urge to fill the air with sound. Let it land. Breathe. Hold your ground. At first, it may feel heavy, even awkward, but that weight is exactly where your presence grows. Over time, others will notice that you're not the kind of person who laughs to belong. You're the kind of person who belongs, because you don't need to perform. Aristotle said, "The ideal man bears the accidents of life with dignity and grace." Dignity and grace do not look like nervous laughter. They look like composure. They look like self-respect. They look like someone who knows when to share joy and when to let silence do the speaking. And in the end, that kind of presence doesn't just make you visible, it makes you undeniable. Next time you're tempted to laugh just to smooth the edges of a sharp moment, pause. Ask yourself, is this laughter real, or is it surrender? If it's surrender, let it go. Stand still. Let the silence carry your strength. Because when people can't read you, they can't control you. And when they can't control you, they begin to respect you. Habit 4, over-explaining simple things. There's a strange kind of panic that creeps in when silence follows your words. You speak, someone listens, and then for a brief second, there's nothing. Aggression. That moment can feel unbearable. And so, to fill the space, you keep talking. You repeat yourself. You add context they didn't ask for. You over-clarify, trying to make sure they get it. But what starts as an attempt to be understood slowly turns into something else. An apology disguised as explanation. You're no longer communicating clearly. You're just proving that you deserve to be heard. And ironically, the more you explain, the less people actually hear. This is what over-explaining really is. A habit born from insecurity, not intelligence. It's not about sharing information. It's about seeking reassurance. At some point, many of us were taught that we had to defend our words, that simply stating something wasn't enough. We had to show our work, explain our intent, and soften the delivery so no one misunderstood us. But this habit, once repeated enough, becomes self-fearing. When you don't trust your own voice to stand on its own, neither will anyone else. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are. And when you speak for too long, looping and layering your ideas, what gets lost is not just the message, it's you." Now, this doesn't mean that detail is your enemy. Clarity matters, but clarity isn't the same as overload. When every sentence needs 5 follow-ups, when every opinion comes with a disclaimer, the effect isn't depth, it's doubt. Stoicism teaches us that discipline is the key to strength. Seneca warned, "It is quality rather than quantity that matters." That applies to your speech just as much as it does to your actions. Powerful people don't have time for speeches where sentences chase themselves in circles. They respect those who can express something valuable and then stop. The pause afterward isn't awkward, it's powerful. Think about the last time someone asked you a simple question, something like, "Do you think we should move forward with this?" And instead of saying, "Yes, here's why," you launched into a 5-minute backstory, explained the risks, apologized for your bias, and padded it all with soft language just to avoid sounding too direct. You may have presumption, meant well, but the message got lost. And more importantly, the listener tuned out. When people are forced to sift through excess to get to your point, they eventually stop trying. They don't tell you this, they just stop asking for your input altogether. The truth is, being brief takes more confidence than being thorough. It takes courage to say something once and let it stand. It takes self-trust to stop speaking and let the silence fill the room. The ones who explain endlessly often believe their words need padding, to be worthy. But the ones who speak briefly and stop, they signal that their words already carry weight. This doesn't just affect how others hear you, it shapes how you see yourself. When you habitually over-explain, you reinforce the belief that your thoughts are not enough as they are. You train your mind to doubt itself. Every time you say "just to be clear," or "what I mean is," or "sorry, I'm rambling," you're sending a message to your own subconscious. My first voice wasn't good enough. But the Stoics believed in internal mastery. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. So, if your thoughts are constantly shaded with doubt, your entire presence starts to take on that tone. This is especially critical in environments where influence matters, whether it's a boardroom, a first impression, or a difficult conversation. Over-explaining makes people question your confidence. They wonder if you're uncertain, if you're hiding something, or if you're trying too hard to be liked. In contrast, someone who speaks once, speaks clearly, and then stops, commands respect without demanding it. Silence after your words doesn't mean the message failed. It often means the message landed. Let it sit, let it echo. Give the listener space to process. Let's be real. Most people aren't listening for your entire speech. They're listening for the signal within the noise. If that signal is buried beneath too much narrative, they miss it. Or worse, they ignore you altogether. The tragedy is that many of the people who over-explain the most have incredibly sharp insights. But those insights are diluted because they don't trust themselves to just say it and leave it there. If this sounds like you, remember, your value isn't in how much you say. It's in how clearly you say what matters. So, how do you shift this habit? Start small. When you're asked a question, give a clear, direct answer. Then pause. Let that answer breathe. If more is needed, they'll ask. If not, you've done your part. At first, it'll feel uncomfortable. You'll want to jump in to clarify, to soften the edges. Don't sit immersion with the silence. Trust that your words have weight. Over time, you'll start to feel the shift, not just in how people respond, but in how you feel about your own voice. This is what the Stoics meant by speaking with discipline. It's not cold or robotic. It's respectful to yourself and to others. You speak like your time is valuable. You don't rush. You don't ramble. You don't perform. You deliver your thought, and then you hold your ground. Because when you learn to stop over-explaining, you stop apologizing for your existence. And when you stop apologizing, people start listening. Let that be your new standard. Clarity over clutter, signal over noise, truth over reassurance. You just need to prove yourself with paragraphs. You just need to speak with presence, and then stop while the room catches up. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Habit 5, waiting to be included. There's a silent agreement many people carry into a room without ever realizing it. A quiet belief that says, if I just sit here long enough, someone will notice me. Someone will open the door. Someone will invite me in. And so they wait. They wait at the edges of conversations. They nod along politely. They look interested, engaged, but they never interrupt, never steer, never speak unless called on. It feels safe. It feels respectful. But what it actually communicates is uncertainty, not just to others, but to yourself. Over time, this habit of waiting to be included doesn't just make you invisible, it makes you optional. This impresent is one of the most damaging habits when it comes to power dynamics. Because powerful people, those who shape rooms, lead decisions, and influence outcomes, aren't looking for someone to rescue. They're looking for people who already know their worth. They respect initiative, not passivity. The quiet hesitation that says, "Is it okay if I speak now?" is read as doubt, not humility. And in environments where speed and certainty matter, doubt gets filtered out fast. Epictetus once said, How long are you going to wait before you demand the best for yourself? That's the heart of it. Not demanding anything from others, but from yourself. The demand to show up, to speak up, to step in without waiting for a green light. Many of us are conditioned to think waiting is virtuous, that patience will be rewarded, that if we just hold back and observe long enough, someone will invite us in. But inclusion that must be begged for doesn't. When you're always the one hoping for space instead of claiming it, you're not seen as equal. You're seen as someone who's still unsure they belong. And whether it's in a social setting, a meeting, or a relationship, that hesitation sends signals. Signals that say, I need your approval before I act. But approval seeking is the opposite of influence. In practical terms, this means you have to unlearn the idea that presence is something others grant you. It's not. Presence is something you decide to bring. Think about your last group conversation. Did you hold back, even when you had something meaningful to contribute? Did you wait for someone to turn and say, "What do you think?" That moment of hesitation might have felt polite, but it cost you something. You trained your brain to stay small, and repetition turns that into a pattern. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others. It is not in the power of others to command your mind. The only thing others control is what you give them. If you give them the power to decide when you speak, how you enter, and whether you're allowed to participate, you've handed over control. You don't need to overpower others to reclaim it. You just need to stop waiting for them." One of the most subtle traps of this habit is the belief that you're being respectful, that by holding back you're being humble. But true humility isn't about making yourself small. It's about knowing your place without needing others to confirm it. When you contribute something thoughtful to a discussion, without being asked, without being prompted, you're not being arrogant, you're being responsible. You're showing that you're engaged, that you see the value in your own mind, that you're not afraid to bring it to the table. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, and part of knowing yourself is trusting your internal signal." When something moves in you, an insight, an opinion, a challenge, you don't need someone else to validate it before you act. You don't need permission to speak. That moment of internal readiness is your invitation. Let's be clear. Inserting yourself isn't about talking over people or making noise to fill space. It's about choosing the right moment to contribute something that moves the conversation forward. It can be a question that cuts to the core, a statement that reframes the issue, even a pause that makes others think. The power isn't in how much you say, but in the fact that you said it without needing to be asked. Seneca warned, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." When you're always alleviated, waiting to be included, you're avoiding a kind of adversity, the discomfort of stepping into space that wasn't formally offered. But that's exactly where growth happens. That discomfort is the test. The more you take it, the more natural it becomes to take your place in any room, any circle, any decision. This habit also affects how people perceive your value. When you speak only when prompted, you're seen as a follower. When you hesitate, people assume you're uncertain. And when they sense that uncertainty, they're less likely to ask for your input next time. It becomes a cycle. You wait, they overlook you. You hesitate, they assume you have nothing to say. Over time, you become a presence that's easy to forget, not because you lack worth, but because you never claimed it. The shift begins with one simple decision. Stop treating presence like it's a reward. It's not. It's a responsibility. When you walk into a room, carry yourself like someone who already belongs. Don't scan for approval. Don't linger for invitations. Choose your moment. Step in. Say something that leaves a mark. Then let your silence hold space. Because those who speak with weight don't need to repeat themselves. And if you feel like your voice might shake or you're unsure if it's the right time, lean on this. Clarity doesn't wait for permission. Neither does conviction. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to believe that your perspective has value, and that belief has to come from within. Habit 6, apologizing for your standards. There's a quiet strength in someone who, overthrow, doesn't flinch when challenged. A kind of inner stillness that says, I know who I am, and I'm not here to negotiate that. It doesn't shout, it doesn't argue, it doesn't over-explain, it just is. And oddly enough, that kind of strength tends to silence even the loudest opposition. But most people never get to feel that kind of power. Not because they lack standards, but because they keep apologizing for them. They say they won't accept certain behavior, certain energy, certain treatment. But when those boundaries are tested, instead of holding firm, they soften, they explain, they offer disclaimers like, I didn't mean it like that, or I just prefer it this way. And in that moment, the standard breaks, not from external pressure, but from internal doubt. This is where so many lose their edge. It's not that they don't have boundaries, it's that they don't trust their right to enforce them. They believe they need to justify their no, soften their, I don't tolerate that, or sugarcoat their preferences to make others comfortable. But comfort isn't, misguided, the goal. Clarity is, and clarity doesn't come with disclaimers. Epictetus once said, know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly. That's what standards are, a reflection of who you are, not something you perform for approval. When you backtrack on your values the moment someone pushes back, you train people to see your boundaries as flexible. And powerful people, whether consciously or not, will test them, not always out of malice, sometimes just to understand where the line really is. But if your response to being questioned is to explain, negotiate, or dilute your stance, the message becomes clear. This person doesn't trust their own limits, and if you don't, why should anyone else? Carl Jung believed that every time we deny a piece of our own truth, we strengthen the shadow, the unseen part of us that grows bitter, resentful, or exhausted from constantly performing. But a real standard isn't something you defend like it's a courtroom argument. It's something you carry like a silent law. Quiet, unbending, certain. Think about it. If someone says, I don't eat meat, and someone else says, oh, come on, just one bite, do they launch into a 5-minute TED Talk about ethics, digestion, and personal history? Not if they're grounded. They just say no thanks and move on. The standard stands because the person holding it doesn't need the other person's understanding to keep it alive. That's the essence of power, being able to hold your ground without needing permission. Seneca put it simply, he who is brave is free. So many people confuse explanation, impartial, with kindness. They think that if they don't justify their boundaries, they're being cold, unfair, or rude. But boundaries aren't acts of aggression, they're acts of self-respect. And self-respect isn't rude, it's necessary. When you walk away from a situation that doesn't align with your values, you're not punishing anyone, you're just refusing to betray yourself. Let's bring this into real-life situations. Someone crosses a line. Maybe they speak to you in a way that doesn't sit right. Maybe they try to guilt-trip you into suchmal, something you've already declined. Maybe they keep pushing your limits, hoping you'll fold. If your response is to say, well, it's just that I really don't like when, or, I mean, I guess I could, but you're signaling uncertainty. The energy behind your words says, I don't know if I'm allowed to stand my ground, so I'll make it easier for you to feel okay with my no. But a no doesn't need wrapping paper. It just needs to be clean, firm, calm. One of the fastest ways to earn quiet respect in any room is to set a boundary and let it stand without performance. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to give a lecture. You don't need to play defense. You just hold the line. And what you'll find is that most people, even the difficult ones, respond to that energy. Not always with praise, not always with agreement, but with recognition. They may push, they may test, but deep down, they respect it. Because that kind of presence, calm, unwavering, unapologetic, is rare. And in a world that rewards convenience and flexibility, people instinctively authorize when they're in the presence of someone who won't bend out of fear. Aristotle once said, dignity does not consist in possessing honors. but in deserving them. And one of the most dignified things you can do is treat your standards as something sacred. Not something you toss aside for comfort, not something you explain away for peace, but something you live by, even when no one is watching. This isn't to say you should never be flexible. Life requires nuance. There are times to listen, to adapt, to compromise when it makes sense and feels right. But flexibility should come from wisdom, not from fear. When you compromise just to avoid tension, what you're actually doing is draining your own confidence. You walk away feeling small, unsure, disconnected. You start to question whether your instincts were ever valid to begin with. That's not growth. That's self-abandonment disguised as politeness. So, here's the shift. Next time you feel the urge to explain your no, catch yourself. Ask, why do I feel the need to make this more palatable? Pretext. What if you simply said, no, I don't do that, or that's not for me, and let the silence carry the message. Not defensively, not coldly, just clearly. Let the other person sit with their reaction. Let them adjust. You don't have to adjust for them. In doing this, you start to build something within yourself, an inner solidity. You become someone whose presence carries boundaries without needing to advertise them. Someone who isn't looking for conflict, but won't contort themselves to avoid it either. That's the person others look at and think, they know exactly who they are. And in a world full of noise and negotiation, that kind of clarity is magnetic. Habit 7, overusing praise. Sometimes the nicest words can say the weakest things. That may sound strange, especially in a world where being nice is considered a virtue. But there's a big difference between genuine kindness and compulsive praise. Most people don't see it. They think showering others with compliments is a way to build rapport, to show warmth, to smooth over tension. But when you hand out praise too easily, you're not building connection. You're trading authenticity for approval. And that trade over time makes your words cheaper, your presence lighter, and your influence smaller. Flattery is the easiest way to disappear in plain sight. You become the one who always agrees, always applauds, always nods enthusiastically at even the most average comment. You think it makes people like you, and maybe for a moment it does. But over time, those same people stop looking at you as an equal. They start seeing you as someone who needs to be liked, someone who gives validation, not because it's earned, but because it's expected. And powerful people, people with weight, discipline, and self-awareness, can feel that desperation immediately. Carl Jung once said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. If you're constantly adjusting your reactions to suit everyone around you, what you're really doing is erasing your shape to fit theirs. Praise isn't the problem. Shimmer and intention are. And intention are. When you give praise in every conversation, after every sentence, you turn a sharp tool into dull noise. Think about it. If someone tells you that's amazing 5 times in one meeting, do you believe any of it? Or does it start to feel automatic, like a reflex instead of a response? The power of a compliment lies in its scarcity. When someone who rarely praises you suddenly says, "You did excellent work," it lands. It means something because you know it wasn't given to keep the peace. It was earned. Revenge. The Stoics understood the danger of dependency, especially emotional dependency. Seneca once wrote, "He who seeks wisdom should be free from the bondage of approval." When your words are driven by the need to be liked, you're not speaking freely. You're managing impressions, and that makes your communication feel hollow, even when your intentions are good. This habit is subtle, but it eats away at your authority. You go from someone whose words shape the room to someone whose praise is expected, but not respected. Overusing praise also sends a message about your standards. If everything impresses you, nothing truly does. It doesn't mean you become cold or stingy with kindness. It means you reserve your recognition for moments that actually deserve it. When someone performs at a high level, when someone pushes past resistance, when someone shows courage or clarity, that's when praise has power. Not when someone does what's expected, not when someone makes a routine comment or offers a surface-level idea. People who lead with constant praise often believe they're spreading encouragement, but what they're actually doing is revealing a fear of tension. They praise to prevent conflict, to keep things light, to avoid being misunderstood. But avoidance is never strength. It's just a delay. Aristotle once said, "To avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing." The same applies to overpraising. When you avoid tension by flooding the room with compliments, you're not being thoughtful, you're being invisible. Let's take this into real life. Imagine, you're in a brainstorming session and someone shares an idea. It's average, nothing wrong with it, but not game-changing either. You respond with, "That's brilliant." Even though you don't fully believe it, what happens? That person feels falsely affirmed. Your standards drop in their eyes, and the others in the room notice your words don't match reality. Now, imagine instead you respond with silence or a neutral nod, and later when someone shares a truly sharp insight, you say, "That's exactly the shift we needed." That single sentence now carries weight. Why? Because you didn't spend your energy on fluff. Marcus Aurelius lived as both a philosopher and an emperor, and he knew the temptation of false praise better than most. He wrote, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." That applies not only to receiving praise, but giving it. Don't give praise to feel needed. Don't hold back criticism to protect your image. Instead, speak with integrity. Praise when it's earned. Stay silent when it's not. This isn't about withholding kindness. It's about protecting its meaning. Another layer of this habit comes from the need to manage how others feel about you. You might praise constantly because you fear being misunderstood, or you've been taught that warmth equals likability. But constant approval seeking keeps you in a dependent posture. And the more you need to be liked, the more others realize they can shape you. They sense that if they withhold affection or connection, you'll bend. That's not influence, it's emotional debt. And it builds fast when you spend praise like spare change. Jungian psychology teaches that the unconscious communicates through patterns. If you notice yourself praising others more than you actually feel admiration, it's time to check the underlying pattern. Are you trying to fill space with approval? Are you afraid that silence will feel cold? The truth is, silence can be respectful. Stillness can be powerful. You don't have to rush in with affirmations to prove you're kind. Sometimes presence itself is enough. So, how do you change this? It starts with IMG, awareness. Notice how often you compliment others. Notice when it feels automatic. Catch yourself when you're tempted to say, "That's great." Just to keep things smooth, ask yourself, is this moment really worth that kind of recognition? Or am I trying to avoid discomfort? When you learn to pause before praising, something powerful happens. You start speaking with precision. You begin to value your own words again, and so does everyone else. Speak when it matters. Praise when it costs something. Save your words until they can actually move someone, not just comfort them. In the end, the real respect you earn isn't from being liked. It's from being clear, being rooted, being someone who doesn't throw around validation like confetti, but who offers it when it's earned, and only then. That's when your words become a mirror, not a mask. That's when your presence begins to carry weight without effort. Here's the challenge. Let your praise be rare, specific, and earned. Let it surprise people, not pacify them. And when you do speak words of recognition, they'll land like thunder, because they'll know it wasn't to be liked. It was because it was true. Habit 8, mirroring too much. There's a strange kind of pressure many people feel when they walk into a room or sit down with someone new. A subtle voice whispers, blend, match them, don't stand out too much. And so without realizing it, we start to shift. We adjust our tone to mirror theirs. We adopt their slang. We match their energy. Sometimes we even copy the way they sit or the rhythm of how they speak. It's not that we're trying to be atheists, fake. We're trying to connect. But in that process of connection, we often lose something far more important, our center. Mirroring, at its core, is not inherently bad. It's a psychological tool we all use unconsciously to build trust. When someone subtly mirrors your body language, it sends the message, I'm with you. I understand you. I'm safe. But like any tool, when overused, it stops being effective and starts being revealing. When you mirror too much, what you're really saying is, I'm willing to abandon my natural rhythm just to be accepted. And the people around you, especially those who are grounded in themselves, can feel that. They may not be able to articulate it, but they'll notice something. You don't hold your shape, but you can't become who you truly are if you keep trading your authenticity for social safety. When your identity is constantly morphing to reflect whoever you're around, you're not bonding, you're blending. And people don't form lasting respect for someone who always blends. They form respect for the one who remains consistent, even in difference. The one who isn't threatened by contrast. The one who doesn't need to mimic in order to connect. This habit often starts from a good place. Maybe you want the conversation to flow more smoothly. Maybe you're trying to make others feel comfortable. But what gets overlooked is the cost. Every time you shift yourself to match someone else, especially when it's not natural, you subtly send the message, I'm not sure who I am in this moment, so I'll take my cue from you. And while that may reduce improperly social friction, it also reduces presence. Because presence isn't just about being liked, it's about being felt. Stoicism teaches us that our power lies in internal stability, not external approval. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it." That's the essence of groundedness. You can be surrounded by strong personalities, by differing energies, and still remain in your own frequency. That doesn't mean you refuse to listen. It doesn't mean you dominate. It just means you don't adjust your character every time the room shifts. Think of someone you've met who speaks in their own rhythm, uses their own language, and doesn't change their tone based on who they're talking to. There's something magnetic about them, right? It's not arrogance, it's consistency. They're not trying to match you. They're inviting you to meet them where they naturally are. And that invitation creates something powerful, curiosity. Because when someone doesn't bend to fit, you start to wonder what's anchoring them. What gives them that calm, that clarity, that self-assurance. Over-mirroring, on the other hand, creates the opposite effect. It makes people feel like they've met a version of themselves, not a new person. And while that might feel comfortable at first, it quickly becomes forgettable. There's no friction, no tension, no contrast. And without contrast, there's no intrigue. Influence doesn't come from sameness. It comes from distinction, from having a shape that others can feel, even if they don't fully understand it. But if you're constantly shifting your tone, humor, values, or energy to align with the person in front of you, when exactly do you get to know yourself? Self-knowledge requires resistance. It requires moments where you say, this is how I speak. This is what I value. This is my natural pace. And when someone else's rhythm doesn't match yours, you don't panic. You hold steady, because that steadiness tells people far more than any surface-level agreement ever could. Let's get practical for a moment. Say you're talking to someone who's high energy, fast-talking, always cracking jokes. If that's not your natural mode, you might feel tempted to match it, to speak faster, laugh louder, throw in humor just to keep up. But what if you didn't? What if you responded in your natural tone, more calm, more grounded, more thoughtful? At first, they might notice the difference, but if you hold steady, they'll start to slow down too. They'll begin to match you because humans are drawn to emotional consistency. When you stay anchored, others eventually adjust to your presence. But if you always adjust to theirs, you become invisible in the process. Seneca warned, "He who always follows another does not find his own path." That applies here too. Over-mirroring is following. It's giving your energy away just to feel included. And while it might make things feel smoother on the surface, beneath it, your influence erodes. You're no longer shaping the room, you're being shaped by it. It's also worth saying you don't need to be dramatic about holding your misuse ground. This isn't about resisting everyone or turning every interaction into a philosophical stance. It's about subtle choices. Do you keep your voice steady even when someone else gets loud? Do you use your own words, even when someone else's slang starts creeping into the conversation? Do you stay calm when someone gets nervous? Those moments may seem small, but over time, they build something powerful. Presence that can't be copied. Carl Jung often explored the tension between the persona, the mask we wear in revise, social settings, and the self, who we truly are. The danger, he said, is when we forget where the mask ends and we begin. If you mirror too much, the mask becomes permanent. You start speaking in borrowed phrases. You laugh at jokes that don't resonate. You nod in agreement even when you don't fully agree. And slowly, invisibly, the real you starts fading into the background. So how do you break the habit? Start by noticing when you shift. Catch the moments where you instinctively change your tone or words to match someone. Submissive, else. Don't shame yourself for it, just notice. Then practice staying in your own rhythm. Speak how you speak. Pause when you need to. Hold eye contact without forcing it. Let your body stay relaxed, not performative. And above all, let differences be okay. You don't have to mirror to connect. Real connection doesn't require mimicry. It requires authenticity. Plato wrote, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." One of the quietest forms of power is the ability to be fully yourself in any room without shrinking or performing. To ship. Walk into a conversation and not worry about matching the other person's energy, because you know your own is enough. And when people feel that they don't just listen, they remember. Don't dissolve to fit. Don't mirror to belong. Belong to yourself first, and let others meet you where you are. Habit 9. Showing gratitude too soon. There's a fine line between gratitude and submission, and most people cross it without even realizing. We're taught from a young age that saying thank you is polite. And yes, gratitude is a beautiful trait when it's genuine and well-timed. But when it's used too early, too often, or too eagerly, it stops being a gesture of respect and becomes a quiet confession of inferiority. In that moment, your words don't say, "I'm thankful." They say, "I'm lucky just to be here. Please don't forget that." And in rooms where presence and perception matter, that single gesture can shift how you're seen, from equal to subordinate. Let's say you walk into a meeting or a conversation, and the first thing out of your mouth is, "Thanks for your time." On the surface, it sounds courteous, but beneath that, it subtly reframes the entire interaction. You've already handed the higher ground to the other person. You've made it clear, without intending to, that this conversation benefits you more than it benefits them. And if they weren't thinking about power or status before, they are now. Because your opening words told them, "You're the one giving, I'm the one receiving." Marcus Aurelius, one of the most grounded leaders in history, wrote, "A man should be upright, not misuse, kept upright." That applies here. Your posture in a conversation, verbal and emotional, should be upright, not tentative, not apologetic, not laced with premature gratitude. You don't need to bow into spaces that you already belong in. You don't need to open with a thank you just to justify your presence. Instead, walk in with calm clarity. Let your words carry weight before you express appreciation. Not because you're entitled, but because you respect yourself enough to establish parity. Carl Jung often spoke about the dangers of living a life shaped by what others think of us. He wrote, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them." That inferno in this case is the internal need to be liked, to seem humble, to show that you're not overstepping. But there's a hidden cost to that behavior. When your first instinct is to thank someone for allowing you into a space before you've even spoken, it implies that your worth is tied to their validation. That's not humility. That's fear wearing a polite mask. Now, to be clear, there's nothing wrong with expressing gratitude. In fact, it's one of the most magnetic traits a person can have, but timing matters. Gratitude carries more impact when it's earned, not offered as a disclaimer. When you've already added value to the conversation, when your presence has shifted something, when there's been a mutual exchange, that's when thank you becomes powerful. Because it's no longer signaling, I hope I didn't waste your time. It's saying, I appreciate this exchange. Let's imagine this in a real-world setting. Two people sit down for a high-stakes conversation. One begins with, "Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me. I really appreciate it." The other starts with, "I've been looking forward to this. I have a few ideas I'd love to share with you." Same scenario, two completely different energies. The first already positioned themselves as someone hoping for approval. The second arrived as someone ready to contribute. And in the subtle world of perception, that difference changes everything. The habit of offering gratitude too soon becomes a pattern of self-minimization. It teaches your nervous system that your role in any important room is to be lesser, to be grateful just for being invited. And over time, that habit shapes your presence. You show up smaller, quieter, unsure. Not because you lack value, but because you keep leading with deference instead of strength. The Stoics would urge you to operate from reason, not emotion. Epictetus taught that our judgments, not events themselves, create our experiences. If you judge a conversation as one where you must thank the other person immediately just for giving you attention, you've already cast yourself in the role of the one being granted something. But if you judge the conversation as a mutual exchange of ideas, a meeting of minds rather than a favor received, then your posture shifts. You no longer speak to be approved, you speak to contribute. This also applies to creative, professional, and social dynamics. When someone offers you feedback, do you immediately say, "Thank you, that's great," even before processing it? When someone gives you an opportunity, do you rush to express gratitude before showing why you were a worthy choice in the first place? Again, the instinct is understandable. Gratitude protects us from appearing arrogant or ungrateful. But when used as a defense mechanism, it stops being about appreciation and starts being about permission. And the more you use it that way, the more you train yourself to believe that you need to shrink in order to be safe. Let's also talk about what happens after you speak. Once you've made your point, offered insight, or contributed meaningfully, that's when your thank you should come. Not too early, not too desperate, but right at the moment when both people feel that something real just happened. That's when your gratitude feels less like submission and more like recognition. Recognition of the value shared, not the value borrowed. So how do you shift the habit? Start by noticing when you're tempted to lead with a thank you. Catch yourself before the instinct takes over. Ask, have I even said anything yet? Have I offered value? Is this gratitude or is this fear? Let your presence enter first. Let your ideas speak for themselves. Let the room adjust to you before you adjust to the room. And when the time is right, when you've already shown up as an equal, then say thank you. Not because you have to, but because it means something. Plato said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something." Apply that to gratitude. The wise express it when it's meaningful. The unsure use it to buy comfort. Which one are you becoming? In the end, gratitude isn't something to be removed. It's something to be refined. When used intentionally, it strengthens your presence. But when used too early, it weakens it. So don't erase your worth by rushing to thank people for noticing you. Show them who you are first. Let the conversation become mutual. Then let your appreciation land like a seal, firm, respectful, undeniable. Habit 10, seeking emotional safety in conversation. Most people don't realize how much of their energy in a conversation is spent managing emotion. Not their own, but everyone else's. You walk into a room, scan for friendly faces, adjust your tone to match the safest one, and before you even say a word, you've already decided how honest you're allowed to be. Maybe you soften your opinions mid-sentence. Maybe you phrase everything as a question just to keep it gentle. Maybe you wait to see how others react before finishing your thought. It feels like social intelligence. It feels like diplomacy. But often it's something else entirely, a deep discomfort with emotional tension. Let's be honest, nobody likes conflict. Nobody wakes up thinking, I hope I make things awkward today. But some people handle discomfort better than others, and that makes all the difference. Because in every interaction, there are moments, small, quiet moments, where you're faced with a choice. Speak your truth or smooth it out. Be direct or be digestible. Say what you mean or say what you think they can handle. And the azle, more often you choose the latter, the more invisible you become. Powerful people, people who lead, who shape decisions, who influence others, don't fear that discomfort. In fact, they create it when necessary. Not because they enjoy it, but because they understand something most don't. Tension reveals the truth. It flushes out the room. It shows who's anchored and who's performing. Carl Jung said, "What you most need will be found where you least want to look." Often what we most need in conversation is honesty. Not just unmistakable with others, but with ourselves. And honesty, by its nature, creates friction. When you avoid tension at all costs, you slowly abandon your position. You shape your words to avoid reactions. You retreat into niceness. You say less than you mean, and you let things slide. Not because you agree, but because you don't want to make things uncomfortable. And here's the hard truth. Every time you do that, you train yourself to fear your own voice. You teach yourself that peace is more valuable than presence, that being liked is more important than being clear. The Stoics had no interest in emotional safety. They weren't cruel or insensitive. They were prepared. Let's say you're in a conversation and someone brings up a topic that touches something personal or important to you. You have an opinion, maybe even a strong one, but you hesitate. You ask yourself, will this make things weird? Will they push back? Will I be judged? And just like that, you dilute your own thought. You dress it up in soft language. You make it a maybe instead of a truth. And the person across from you may nod. They may be dubious, smile, but they won't remember you. Because what you gave them wasn't clarity, it was comfort. Now imagine the same conversation, but this time you speak directly. You say, "I disagree with that," and let the silence follow. You say, "That's not how I see it," and let the weight of your words land. It might create friction. It might shift the tone, but what it definitely does is establish presence. Not forcefully, not aggressively, just firmly. That firmness doesn't push people away. It invites them into a real interaction because discontent, deep down, people respect what doesn't flinch. Seneca once wrote, "No man was ever wise by chance." Wisdom doesn't come from making others feel good all the time. It comes from seeing clearly and speaking cleanly, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And in conversation, that means resisting the urge to manage every emotional variable. You don't need to be cold or detached, but you do need to stop apologizing for speaking directly. You need to stop editing yourself in real time just to keep things smooth. There's a reason powerful people use silence deliberately. When you speak and then pause, letting your words stand without rushing to soften them, you create space. Space for reflection, space for discomfort, space for meaning. Most people hate that space. They rush to fill it. But those who can hold it, those who can let it stretch without panic, are the ones others start to pay attention to. This doesn't mean you should turn every conversation into a debate or seek conflict for its own sake. But you should be aware of how often you avoid it, how often you swallow a real thought to keep the peace, how often you change your tone mid-sentence because someone raised an eyebrow. These aren't small habits. They shape how people experience you, and more importantly, they shape how you experience yourself. You earn dignity by showing up honestly, even when honesty feels risky, especially when it does. That doesn't mean you have to be blunt or harsh. It means your words come from a place of internal clarity, not external approval. You say what's real, and then let the other person do what they will with it. That's dignity. That's presence. If you've spent most of your life avoiding conflict, this habit won't change overnight. You'll still feel the pull to please, to smooth, to keep it safe. But the shift starts when you pause before you soften. When you notice the instinct to rephrase and decide not to. When you let the silence sit for just a few seconds longer than is comfortable. Over time, those small acts of steadiness become part of your presence, and people feel it. They may not always agree with you, but they will respect you. The goal isn't to be the loudest voice in the room. It's to be the clearest. And clarity often comes with friction. That's okay. Let it come. You don't need to be emotionally bulletproof. You just need to be anchored. When someone challenges you, you don't fold. When a moment gets tense, you don't retreat. When you feel the urge to please, you pause. That pause is where your power lives. Plato once said, "Courage is knowing what not to fear." Don't fear tension. Don't fear silence. Don't fear a raised eyebrow or a translucent, an awkward pause. These are just signals that something real is happening, something meaningful. And if you stay present through them, you come out the other side stronger, clearer, more whole. Next time you feel yourself scanning the room for safety, don't. You are the safety. You are the grounded presence. You are the one who doesn't need every moment to be smooth in order to stay calm. That's the kind of presence that doesn't just survive the storm, it changes the weather. Habit 11, avoiding physical space. You can walk into a room without saying a word and still be heard, not through your voice, but through your presence, through how you carry yourself, how you take up space, how you hold your body before any conversation even begins. Most people don't realize it, but the body speaks before the mouth does. And for those who habitually shrink, who sit at the edges, who fold their arms tightly across their chest as if bracing for impact, the message is loud and clear. I don't belong here. Don't mind me. I'll stay out of the way. It's subtle, but the effects are not. You might be the smartest person in the room. You might have insight, depth, talent, and experience. But if your body hides, so do all those things. Because powerful people don't just hear your words, they read your posture. They pay attention to who commands the room without effort and who tries to disappear inside it. And when your physical presence whispers submission, most people, especially those with strong personalities, don't even stop to consider what you might have to say. Stoic philosophy taught that we should never give away our power voluntarily. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look there." And what better way to look into yourself than to observe how your body shows up when your voice hasn't yet spoken? Are you collapsing inward? Are you curling up to take less space? Are you unconsciously apologizing for your existence with every movement? Carl Jung believed deeply in the power of the unconscious to shape behavior. He argued that much of what we do, especially what we do with our bodies, is not entirely within our awareness. Shrinking away, physically retreating, folding into ourselves. These are often unconscious habits formed by years of subtle conditioning. Don't be too loud, don't stand out, don't challenge the room. But eventually, these quiet decisions train the mind to believe that taking up space is unsafe. The body teaches the mind, and when the body learns to hide, the mind follows. But here's the truth. Presence is physical, submerged, before it's psychological. Before someone hears what you know, they sense how you hold yourself. If you take up space confidently, not arrogantly, but naturally, you create a kind of gravitational field. People feel it. They register your presence without you asking for it. And that registration opens doors before you even knock. It invites others to take you seriously before you've said a single word. Let's get specific. You're in a meeting or a group setting. There's a long table, chairs against the walls, maybe a few at TE1, people already talking. Where do you sit? Do you quietly choose the seat near the wall? Or do you walk confidently to the center and take a place that's visible? Once you sit, do you cross your legs, hunch your back, clasp your hands in your lap? Or do you plant your feet, rest your arms with ease, and sit with the quiet assurance of someone who doesn't need to be invisible? And how much time is wasted in life simply by trying not to be seen? How many chances passed us by because our posture told the world, "I'm not ready, I'm not enough, don't choose me." Not because we lacked the skill, but because we lacked the willingness to show up fully physically. It's worth understanding the psychological power of physicality. The brain and body work in a loop. When you slump your shoulders, look downward, and fold into yourself, your brain interprets that as submission, as insecurity. Your thoughts start aligning with your posture. But when you adjust your body, shoulders back, chest open, feet grounded, your brain receives a very different message. I'm here. I'm EEAGG. Anchored. I belong. That shift alone begins to change the way you think, speak, and move. This is not about becoming dominant or trying to control a room through physical intimidation. It's about embodiment. It's about showing up with a posture that reflects your inner worth. Even if you don't fully feel it yet, sometimes the body leads and the mind catches up. Think of it like this. Confidence isn't a prerequisite for presence. Sometimes presence builds confidence, and presence begins with space. Taking up space is a subtle expression of power, not the kind that demands, but the kind that grounds, the kind that says, I don't need to prove anything, but I won't disappear either. In rooms where competition is silent and influence is measured in attention, the way you occupy physical space becomes a kind of unspoken language. And like any language, it can be learned. So what does this look like in your daily life? Start paying attention to your posture when you enter a room. Notice where your hands go when you're nervous. Do you fidget? Cross your arms? Hold something in front of you like a shield. Try letting your arms relax by your side or rest gently on the table. Keep your back straight, not stiff. Let your breathing be slow and even. Sit or stand like someone who isn't performing, but also isn't retreating. There's no need to fake dominance or exaggerate your gestures. The goal isn't to be theatrical, it's to be solid, to replace habits of contraction with habits of calm expansion. To teach your nervous system that space isn't something you have to disregard, it's something you have to stop giving away. Becoming conscious of how you occupy physical space might bring up insecurities you've long ignored, but facing them is the first step in dissolving them. The body can become your teacher if you listen to it. If you practice stillness, if you stop hiding within your own skin in time, these small shifts build into something much bigger. You'll notice people make more eye contact with you. You'll notice they listen a little longer, speak to you with more respect, not because you, mistakenly, demanded it, but because your presence communicated it long before your words did. Stop shrinking. Stop folding yourself into corners, both physically and mentally. Sit like you matter. Stand like you've got something to offer. Take up space, not to crowd others, but to finally stop crowding yourself. Let your posture speak even before you do. Let your body say what your soul has always known. You belong here. Habit 12. Over-identifying with good intentions. There's a silent rule that plays out in every interaction. You're not judged by your intentions. You're judged by your impact. And yet so many of us cling to this fragile idea that if we meant well, then somehow we should be forgiven, understood, or even praised. But that's not how life or influence works. People can't see your inner world. They don't hear the thoughts behind your words or feel the kindness behind your awkwardness. They only perceive what you project. And the brutal truth, intentions don't carry weight if your presence, your delivery, or your energy says something entirely different. You, exercised, have had the purest motive in a conversation, trying to help someone, trying to offer support or insight. But if your tone was hesitant, your words were poorly timed, or your body language screamed insecurity, it doesn't matter what you meant. What matters is what you communicated. And the more you explain yourself afterward, I was just trying to help, I didn't mean it that way, the more powerless you appear. Powerful people, the ones who command respect in any room, don't operate in the realm of intention. They operate in the realm of aggression, effect. This is where the Stoic perspective becomes essential. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." That's exactly the issue here. Good intentions are like a philosophy, a quiet personal code, but no one respects a code you keep locked inside. If your behavior contradicts your intent, people will trust your behavior, not your words, not your apologies, not the story you tell after the fact. And if you constantly find yourself saying, "That's not what I meant," then it's not other people who need to combating change, it's you. Carl Jung explored this in his work on the persona, the mask we wear in public. He warned that if we're too attached to our self-image, especially one rooted in being a good person, we become blind to the shadow we cast. Meaning, you could think you're helping, but your energy might come off as manipulative. You might feel confident inside, but show up as timid or unclear. Your inner story doesn't always align with the story you're actually telling through your presence. This isn't about being fake. It's about aligning your internal world with your external expression. There's no dignity in thinking, well, I had good intentions, so I did my part. That's a way of avoiding accountability, because if you really care about the outcome, if you truly want to connect, influence, or lead, then your responsibility is to close that gap between what you feel and what others receive. Think about it in simple terms. If someone hands you a drink and accidentally spills it on you, the fact that they meant well doesn't change the fact that you're soaked. And if they do it again next week, still smiling, still well-meaning, it starts to feel less like kindness and more like incompetence. That's how people perceive you, when your actions, tone, and presence don't match the story you tell about yourself. You can be the kindest person in the world, but if your presence feels needy, apologetic, or chaotic, you'll still be treated with skepticism. If you habitually show up in a way that's confusing or contradictory, that's who you become in people's eyes, no matter what you meant. So, the question is not, how do I explain myself better? The real question is, how do I express myself with more alignment? Start here. Take radical ownership of your signals. That means becoming hyper-aware of your tone. Do you raise your pitch at the end of your sentences like you're not sure? Do you soften your opinions with unnecessary qualifiers like, I could be wrong, but, or, I don't know if this matters? Do you apologize for things no one noticed? These are behaviors that override your good intentions. They say, please don't be mad at me. Please still like me. And no matter how smart or kind you are, those signals create an impression of weakness, not warmth. Seneca, one of the most grounded Stoics, wrote, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." If your ambition is to be someone who commands respect and moves through life with clarity, then your behavior needs to reflect that ambition. Not just your thoughts, not just your private motives, but your posture, your voice, your boundaries, and your timing. These things matter. These are the tools through which people decide whether you're someone to listen to or someone to overlook. And yes, this takes practice, because many of us were raised to believe that being nice is enough, that if our hearts are in the right place, then our social outcomes will eventually catch up. But that's a passive way to move through the world. Stoicism is not passive. It's about training the self to act with clarity and intention, not just to feel well-meaning, but to be effective. So, what does this look like in real life? It means you stop chasing the perfect words and start focusing on clean delivery. Say what you mean, clearly and without unnecessary softening. If someone misinterprets you, don't scramble to over-explain. Instead, own it calmly. Correct it once and move forward. If your tone was off, fix it through behavior, not apology. If your body language was closed, open it up. If your presence was scattered, ground yourself and re-enter with stillness. Don't let your communication become a desperate attempt to prove your good nature. Instead, let your words be deliberate. Let your tone carry weight. Let your silence be full of intention. That's how powerful people move. They don't explain themselves into understanding. They embody understanding. Another key point here is timing. Good intentions are often used as a crutch after something goes wrong. That's backward. The real strength is in preparing your presence before the interaction happens. That means rehearsing, not scripts, but states. Practicing calm breathing before you speak. Practicing holding eye contact without flinching. Practicing delivering disagreement without emotional leakage. These are the real-life rituals that sharpen your ability to show up the way you want to be seen. And here's the ironic twist. When you stop clinging to your good intentions, you actually become a better person, because you're not hiding behind the idea of being good. You're actively refining your actions to do good effectively. You become someone people trust, not because you said all the right things, but because you carried yourself with congruence. That's rare, and rare is powerful. Next time you find yourself saying, "That's not what I meant," pause. Ask yourself, then what did I actually say? What did I actually signal? And how can I better align my intent with my presence next time? That's the question that turns unconscious behavior into conscious growth. That's what separates those who merely wish to be respected from those who are. Habit 13, treating influence like it must be earned. We grow up being told that if we just work hard, stay humble, and keep our helm heads down, one day someone will tap us on the shoulder and say, "It's your time." That moment never comes, not in the way you expect, because the truth is the world doesn't reward quiet effort. It responds to visible presence. You can be the most talented, the most prepared, the most well-meaning person in the room, but if you act like you're waiting for permission, you'll get passed by. Influence isn't a medal handed out for good behavior. It's a posture, a mindset. It's something you step into, not something you're handed. This is where so many people get it wrong. They think influence must be earned, like a grade. That if you just keep doing good work, eventually someone will elevate you. But power doesn't work like that. Influence isn't transactional. It's perceptual. It begins the moment you assume it. That doesn't mean faking arrogance or puffing yourself up. It means walking into a room with the quiet certainty that you belong, that your voice has weight, that your presence has gravity. It's an inner stance, not an outer performance. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." In the same way, don't waste time trying to prove you deserve respect. Be someone who naturally commands it. This is not about domination or control. It's about alignment, behaving in a way that reflects the value you already carry. Because if you don't believe in your own authority, why should anyone else? Carl Jung spoke of the concept of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, distinct from the roles and masks you've been conditioned to wear. Most people operate from a learned identity, the helpful one, the humble one, the quiet one, and they treat influence like something reserved for others, those with louder voices, flashier titles, more charisma. But individuation demands that you integrate your strength, not hide it behind politeness, not shrink it behind earning your place. You already have a place, you just haven't claimed it yet. There's a pattern to how people defer. It's subtle, but it shows. They sit at the edge of the room. They wait for the conversation to make room for them. They preface every thought with disclaimers. "This might be silly, but," or "I'm not sure, but maybe." That's the voice of someone seeking permission, and powerful people can feel it. They don't respond by pulling you in. They respond by letting you stay invisible. Because whether we like it or not, most social environments operate on energy signals. And when you radiate uncertainty, people receive it as a cue to overlook you. It's not about being aggressive. It's about being anchored. There's a difference. Anchored energy is calm, centered, steady. It doesn't grasp, it doesn't shrink, it simply is. When you speak with conviction, when you take up space without apology, when you enter a room as if your presence matters, people are just, not because you demanded anything, but because your self-respect teaches them how to treat you. So many people suffer from the imagined consequences of being bold. They think, what if I speak up and it's wrong? What if I seem full of myself? What if people, timetable, thrive, think I'm arrogant? So they default to silence. But in doing so, they suffer the very thing they were trying to avoid: being overlooked, being dismissed, being underestimated. Stoicism teaches us to resist that anticipatory suffering, to meet the moment as it is, not through fear or fantasy, but through clarity and poise. The truth is, everyone's waiting for someone to validate them, waiting for permission to show up fully. But the ones who rise are the ones who stop waiting. They understand that self-respect isn't earned by collecting approval. It's practiced in how you show up, in how you speak, in how you hold your own gaze when no one else is watching. But let's take that a step further. If you deserve honor, act like it. Don't apologize for your presence. Don't whisper your ideas. Don't sit in the back row of your own life. Move like someone who belongs at the table, not because you're better than anyone, but because you finally stopped arguing with yourself about your worth. You can still be humble and assertive. The two are not opposites. True humility isn't about diminishing yourself. It's about knowing your value without having to prove it constantly. When you stop begging for acknowledgement and begin embodying your worth, the shift is visible. People lean in. They listen closer. Not because your voice got louder, but because your energy stopped asking for permission. That's what influence really is. It's not how many people follow you. It's how you move through a room, how you speak without rushing, how you hold silence without squirming, how you listen without shrinking. Influence is not in dismantle a boards of vibration, one that others instinctively recognize and respect. So the next time you find yourself thinking, maybe I need to prove myself a little more, pause. Ask yourself, what if I don't? What if the proving is actually the barrier? What if the need to earn it is keeping you stuck in a loop where you never quite feel ready, never quite feel enough? Instead, try this. Walk into the room like the spotlight is already yours, not because you're chasing attention, but because you've stopped hiding. Sit like your thoughts matter. Speak like they carry weight. Listen like you're not trying to impress anyone. That's the paradox. When you let go of trying to earn influence, you begin to embody it. Plato once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." And this is a form of self-conquest. It's defeating the part of you that still waits for the world to crown you before you rise. It's shedding the belief that value has to be granted externally, and it's stepping fully into the truth that no one can make you influential. You have to decide you are. Ask yourself, are you still waiting to be picked, or have you picked yourself? Because the moment you stop waiting is the moment the game changes, not just for you, but for how the world responds to you. Habit 14, always rushing to prove your worth. It's strange, isn't it? The more you try to prove you belong, the more you feel like you don't. You walk into a room and almost immediately something in you starts whispering. You have to justify yourself, so you talk faster, list off accomplishments, highlight the credentials, explain your story. You don't even realize you're doing it. It's automatic. But the message behind all that explaining is crystal clear. Please believe that I'm enough. The irony is heartbreaking because in that moment, no matter how qualified or capable you are, your energy betrays you. It says, I don't believe I'm worthy yet. I'm still trying to convince myself. And people can feel that influence isn't in the resume. It's in the rhythm. And when your rhythm is desperate, rushed, anxious, it pushes people away, even if your words are impressive. We live in a world obsessed with performance, so it makes sense that we've been trained to introduce ourselves by what we've done, where we went to school, what we've built, who we know. We rush to prove value, not because we're arrogant, but because we're afraid of being overlooked, afraid of not being taken seriously, afraid of not being enough without an explanation. But here's the truth. Those who carry real weight don't rush. They don't list. They don't semantics. They radiate. It's not about what they say. It's how they sit, how they observe, how they speak, slowly, deliberately, without needing to fill silence with credentials. There's a calmness in them that says, I know what I bring to the table. I don't need to prove it. I just need to show up. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In this context, the enemy isn't a person, it's insecurity. It's that nagging impulse to perform your worth instead of living it. The best revenge. Spinach. Don't play the game. Don't rush to explain yourself to people who haven't earned the right to hear your story. Don't seek validation like it's a lifeline. Your piece is louder than your pitch. There's a quiet kind of confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. That's the kind of energy that shifts a room. But you only arrive there when you stop fighting for space and start occupying it. That's the subtle art. Instead of trying to convince people you're valuable, be valuable and let that speak for you. Most people confuse presence with performance. But presence isn't what you do, it's what you hold. For many of us, the unconscious belief that we are not enough drives every interaction. We don't realize it's there. We think we're just being thorough, just being polite, just making a good impression. But underneath that urge to prove is a much deeper insecurity. And until you confront it, you'll keep performing for people who aren't even watching. This is the tragedy of over-explaining. The more you speak, the more you dilute your presence. The more you list, the more you shrink. It's counterintuitive, but it's real. People don't believe what you say. They believe what you embody. And if you walk into a room with nervous energy, all the credentials in the world won't mask it. But if you enter with silence, poise, and unshakable self-respect, you won't have to say much. They'll feel it. Epictetus once taught that if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. That's a radical kind of power. To be okay with not proving yourself. To be still while others perform. To let people misunderstand you, underestimate you, even ignore you because you know who you are. When you stop needing everyone to understand your brilliance becomes undeniable. Not because it's loud, but because it's anchored. This kind of restraint is difficult, especially if you grew up having to earn every drop of recognition. If your value was always tied to performance, grades, achievements, praise, you probably learned that silence was dangerous, that being overlooked meant being unloved. So in large, now, as an adult, you rush, not because you're vain, but because you're scared. You don't want to disappear again. But disappearing isn't caused by saying too little. It's caused by believing too little. When you hold the belief that you must constantly convince others of your value, your very presence becomes an apology. You walk around trying to earn what you already carry, and people sense that. They don't know why they lose interest. They just do. Because desperation doesn't breed trust. Stillness does. One of the biggest ways submerged waste our time is performing for people who don't even see us. We use words to build ladders to acceptance, when what we really need is a foundation of inner stillness. If you stop trying to prove your story will unfold naturally. And when it's time to speak, your words will carry weight, not because they were impressive, but because they came from someone who didn't need to impress. When you know yourself, you don't need to pitch yourself. You realize that your presence, your values, your integrity, righteousness, your calm, those things say more than any list ever could. You become the kind of person who doesn't rush to prove, but instead radiates certainty through your restraint. Power doesn't always come from title or wealth. It also comes from energy, from command. And those who carry power gracefully never beg to be seen. They sit in their truth. They watch. They respond deliberately. They don't perform. And when they speak, people listen. So here's the challenge. The next time you feel that rising urgency to prove your worth, to quickly, allergies, your wins, your titles, your backstory, pause. Ask yourself, who am I trying to convince? Them or me? Because if it's you, then no amount of talking will satisfy that ache. What will? Stillness, ownership, and the radical decision to stop explaining and start embodying. Your worth is not a pitch. It's not an elevator speech. It's not in the bullet points on a LinkedIn page. It's in your presence. It's in your energy. It's in how you listen, how you breathe, how you sit in silence without folding under its weight. The most powerful person in the room is rarely the loudest. They are the most composed, the most centered, the least reactive. When you stop rushing to prove your worth, something strange happens. People begin to assume it. That's the paradox. You become more respected, not when you speak the most, but when your energy says the most, while your mouth stays quiet. So speak when it adds value, hold silence when it doesn't, and remember, your presence is the proof. Habit 15, letting others control your pace. Have you ever noticed how easily people surrender their tempo? Not just in conversation, but in how they walk, talk, and even breathe. You're walking down the street, and the person next to you speeds up, and without realizing it, so do you. You're in a meeting, and someone speaks fast, and suddenly your voice starts to rush too. You mirror their pace, not because you intend to, but because your body is quietly trying to adapt, to keep up, to belong. But here's the truth. When you let someone else set your pace, you let them set your power. Presence isn't just about being in the room. It's about being rooted in yourself, regardless of what's happening around you. And the moment you start adjusting your rhythm to match theirs, especially out of habit or anxiety, you start leaking control, drop by drop. We've been conditioned to think that adaptability is a strength, and to some extent it is. But there's a fine line between flexibility and submission. When your energy is constantly responding to everyone else's pace, you slowly dissolve into the background. You become forgettable. People remember those who, their own time, their own gravity, the ones who walk into a space and the room rearranges around them, not the other way around. This isn't about arrogance, it's about anchoring your presence so deeply in your own rhythm that even in the middle of chaos, you stay still where it matters. Imagine a calm lake. Someone throws a stone. The surface ripples, but the lake itself doesn't chase the stone. That's how you should move. Let the world ripple. You remain composed. Becoming who you truly are demands prescience, non-negotiable. You can't live on other people's timing. You can't find yourself if you're always keeping pace with someone else's urgency, someone else's fear, someone else's noise. You have to carve out space for your rhythm, your speech, your reactions, your silence. Think of great speakers, the ones who leave a mark. They don't speak quickly to match the audience's restlessness. They speak slowly, deliberately. They pause. They let silence do half the work. That silence commands more respect than 100 rushed words ever could. That silence, graphite, says, I am not here to entertain you. I am here to speak truth. And truth doesn't beg for attention. It owns attention. This is the same reason why the Stoics valued inner stillness over external validation. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about not letting the mind be dragged around by the impulses of others. He knew that a reactive mind is a weak one. When someone else's mood dictates your tone, when their speed dictates your energy, you've handed over something sacred, your self-possession. It shows up in small things. You're in a smash conversation, and they interrupt. And instead of holding your ground, you rush your words to keep up. You're asked a question, and instead of taking a breath, you answer immediately, as if silence will somehow disqualify you. But real presence isn't rushed. It's measured. It holds space. And you can see this in the way powerful people enter a room. They don't sprint. They don't dart their eyes. They move like time bends around them. Every step is deliberate. Every glance is intentional. They're not being slow to impress. They're being centered, shimmer, silk, to remain in control. The world rushes for approval, but presence walks calmly toward truth. If you want to reclaim your rhythm, start by slowing everything down. Not for drama, but for dignity. Speak slowly, not because you lack urgency, but because you have clarity. React slowly, not because you're dull, but because you're unshaken. Pause when someone expects you to answer instantly. Let them feel the stillness. Let them meet you on your timing. That moment right there, that's influence. Seneca once said, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." And this applies to the pace of your mind too. When your attention is scattered across a dozen people's energy, when you're adjusting yourself every 5 minutes to keep up with someone else's mood or tone or walk, you disappear. You become nowhere because there's no core holding you together. The pace of your life becomes everyone else's playlist and you forget your own rhythm. And here's the thing, they won't tell you that you're drifting. Most people don't even notice that they're steering your energy. It's subtle. A fast talker makes you stumble over your words. An impatient listener makes you shrink your ideas. A dominant personality makes you second-guess your tone. But it doesn't have to be this way. You don't need to overpower anyone. You just need to hold your frequency. That's what rattles people. Not loudness, not ego, just the unshakable quiet of someone who doesn't move faster just because the world is panicking. Someone who doesn't speed up their voice just because someone else is rushing them. Someone who walks slowly through fallen chaos, not because they're unaware, but because they're untouched. The moment you begin to move at your own pace, everything changes. Conversations slow down. Eyes turn toward you. Your words carry more weight. And the world, which usually only listens to noise, leans in toward your silence. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's rare. Influence isn't about matching the energy in the room. It's about becoming the energy that the room starts to match. When your pace is yours, calm, controlled, unforced, people don't just thirst, listen, they follow. Not because you demanded it, but because you demonstrated it. So when you walk into a room, don't rush. Let your steps speak before your voice does. When you speak, breathe between sentences. Let your words settle. When someone pushes their pace on you, smile gently, but don't chase them. And when someone rushes you for a decision, take your time anyway, because that time isn't wasted. It's claimed. Remember, you're not here to match the beat of the world. You're here to move with the beat of your truth. And truth doesn't need to rush to prove itself. The most powerful presence in any room is not the one speaking the most or moving the fastest. It's the one who controls their tempo, like a conductor guiding an orchestra, not with force but with rhythm. Your rhythm. Most people live on borrowed rhythms, chasing pace, chasing approval, chasing presence. But the moment you claim your own timing, the world begins to move around you. Power isn't loud. It's calm, certain, unbothered. And if you carry that stillness with you, you don't just reimburse, walk into rooms. You change them. If this resonated with you, there's another video waiting on the screen that will deepen this transformation. I invite you to watch it next. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Podamoro.